Now, the UK imposed austerity measures not too long ago, which have affected the lives of people, many who are now looting on the streets of the UK. Not too long ago, too, austerity measures pushed people into the streets of Greece. Is there a connection? And could this get worse as the U.S. and the global economy head towards what some call recession, what some say could be a depression? Well, joining me from Greece is a radio host and economics blogger, Dimitri Kofinas, who was covering those protests in Greece when they were going on. Dimitri, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So my first question to you, you covered the protests in Greece. You were there when people in Greece reacted to austerity measures. You've talked about the toll austerity measures have taken on the economy of Greece. People have suggested these riots in London, too, are fueled by economic issues, lack of mobility, inequality, austerity measures. Do you see a connection between what's going on in Greece, what's going on in the UK, and what's happened in Europe, in Portugal and other places as well?
I mean, I think there's an eerie similarity between these riots and the ones that happened in December of '08 in Greece, because we had a similar sort of situation where the instigation was the murder of a young man, a 15-year-old boy. But in general, we're seeing riots across the developed world and the developing world. I mean, part of it's food riots, other parts of it are austerity, but it's a trend that we seem to see, and it's certainly a trend that you would expect to see during a bear market. And we're certainly in a bear market, certainly in the West, but globally as well, I'd say, and it's not surprising.
I mean, it all stems from economic issues, and just to look at inequality, for example, in Britain, in 2010, the richest 10% of the population had more than 100 times the wealth of the poorest 10%. In the United States, the richest 10% controls 2/3 of net worth of Americans. So do you think that the same kind of unrest will come to the United States? We have the same issues in the United States.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think that there's no question that's going to happen. And the downgrade of S&P of the United States, whether it was warranted or not, I think speaks volumes about the shift of risk from the balance sheet of banks to the balance sheets of sovereign countries, which are effectively the backstops for the welfare state. So when that gets thrown into question, of course, you're going to have mounting unrest. And I think ultimately, because the system architecture is such with the banking system and the way that the sovereign countries have been effectively backstops for the banking system, I think that you're going to see more unrest, especially in the United States, because the U.S. is an empire and it's the reserve currency of the world. So when the system collapses, it's going to be most felt in the U.S. because an empire sits on the nation state within which it resides like a giant parasite. So when that crumbles, it's the biggest, it's the final piece to go.
But Dimitri, at the same time, you said that the United States dollar is the reserve currency. There are unique aspects to the United States that somewhere like Greece doesn't have. The U.S. has monetary policy at its disposal. It can print its own currency. Greece can't do that. Greece is attached to the euro. They don't have that ability. They can't print the reserve currency. And yesterday, the Federal Reserve came out and said they'll keep interest rates near zero for 2 years. So do you think that this will help the U.S. economy in a way that other economies can't be?
Well, what it does is it gives the U.S. the flexibility to continue to get capital, and it gives the flexibility to the U.S. Treasury market, because we have seen Treasury yields drop substantially during this period, whereas in the UK, not the UK, I'm sorry, in Europe, you're seeing a real rise for yields. Now you're seeing it in Italy. Right. It's one of the things that's instigated the ECB to go into the secondary bond market and buy up a lot of Italian and Spanish debt. But I don't think that this is a good thing for the United States. Absolutely not. ZIRP, zero interest rate policies. We're only getting that because the banking system is insolvent, and the Federal Reserve has to continue to pump credit, which it's just credit, it's just more debt to continue to prop up the system. So I don't think that it's a good thing for the long term. In the short term, it allows the U.S. to stay afloat, perhaps longer than Europe would otherwise.
What will it do in the long term, though? I mean, is it really going to help? Because, I mean, just Joseph Stiglitz was writing in Financial Times earlier today that those worried about the shortage of policy instruments are partially correct, that bad monetary policy got us into this mess, but it cannot get us out. Can it do anything? Does the Federal Reserve have any tools that could do anything?
Well, I think that the Fed has proven inept, really, because the thing is the money multiplier is broken in the banking system. Remember, the Federal Reserve uses the federal funds rate to push down the borrowing rate for banks. But if no one's willing to borrow that money, you're in that what people call the liquidity trap, which is why the Fed was forced to find innovative ways to continue to prop up the system. That's what QE1 and QE2 were about. They were buying bonds. They were buying long-term bonds. I mean, the Fed could effectively, if it wanted to, it may go against its charter, but theoretically the Fed could go in and buy whatever it wants with its open market operations. So theoretically the Fed could go in and monetize everything on the planet, but that's not going to do anything. It's going to flood the world with dollars, price everything to infinity, and collapse the monetary system. And that's the nature of the system. The system is architected so that it's going to self-destruct. Ever since we went off of Bretton Woods, we were running deficits in the 1960s. We had the guns and butter, Great Society of Lyndon Johnson, Vietnam War, that got us off of the de facto gold standard and the fixed exchange rate system of Bretton Woods. And that pushed us into the inevitable position that we're in today, which is boom, bust, and move to the point where the nation states take all the liabilities of the banking system and then effectively put themselves in a position where they've sat on the grenade. And the nation state is the vessel that within which humanity has been able to safeguard certain human rights. And if that goes, it's effectively a neo-feudalist model.
So can leaders that now have so much control, can federal or central banks that now have so much control, or there's so much reliance on to fix this, can they do anything at this point to keep the U.S. or any other countries in Europe from heading towards recession or depression, as some are saying we're headed?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting thing. In Japan, after 1993, Japan started to expand its public debt substantially as it tried to get out of what was then a balance sheet depression, because the banks had taken on so much debt. So the government was then had all the yen flooded into the Japanese bond market, which drove down yields for the Japanese government, and they were able to try to keep the system up. Today, you've got a similar situation. The banks are trying to take advantage of those low yields and of that money coming into the U.S. Treasury to prop up the banking system through federal government spending. But unlike the 1990s, there are some things that are not in the favor of the current system today. And I think that an indication of that is gold, the price of gold. Gold is now near 1,800. I don't think it broke through it today. But gold was in a bear market, still in a bear market in the 1990s. Today, gold is in a secular bull market. And gold is an indication of a deleveraging of assumptions in this system. It's so as the system deleverages debt, as it deleverages credit, as it writes down liabilities and debt, gold continues to rise because people don't trust not only the banking system, but they don't trust the governments anymore. It used to be that governments were a backstop. People would put their money in the Treasury, they'd put the money at the BOJ, they'd put the money in Japan, in the sovereigns as a safeguard. Today, they don't trust the governments anymore, and that's a real big change and a big problem.
I want to, you touched on a really interesting point, and it's a question of, are we in a new era where politicians can't do anything, leaders can't do anything, where really, there's nothing that can be done by these people that are in power. And Jeremy Grantham, he is founded GMO. It's a large investment management firm, manages $106 billion or so. He said in a note, "My worst fear is about the potential loss of confidence in our leaders, institutions, and capitalism itself are being realized. We have been digging this hole for a long time." I mean, Dimitri, is there just really nothing that anybody can do, that no political leader can do, that no president can do, that no central bank can do? Are we in a new era?
That's a really good question. There's some Austrian economists who have respect for the free market who recognize all the problems of the fiat money system that has blown up and has really been responsible for the expansion of the money supply since 1971, who believe that nothing can be done, that there has to be a system reset because the system is so defragmented and so discombobulated. But there are certain Austrian economists, you have some on your show and others, who try to advocate for certain Keynesian solutions because they recognize, look, we don't like this system. It's not a good system, but we're so far down the rabbit hole that the government has to step in now that it's the only one that people trust beyond, outside of gold, let's say, which does nothing. It's just deflation. Put the money to work, build solar panels, build a high-speed rail, and maybe the private sector could take advantage of that. I've tried to look at those solutions and I've tried to think about them and see, do they work? And I've tried to be very optimistic about it. But the reality is, if you went with what the government has offered so far to a venture capitalist firm, they would have escorted you out of the office in handcuffs, because the business model or the business plan that a government provides is not a business plan. Governments don't know how to spend money. They've proven inept at doing so. So I don't have faith in politicians and policymakers and professional economists to get us out of this crisis, because if they understand how to do that, they wouldn't be in the position they were in. They would be in the private sector doing something different.
There you go. Not much that anybody can do, but I appreciate you for telling us what you think, where you think this is all going. That was Dimitri Kofinas. He's radio host and economics blogger.